obviously by the District Council, and it's to provide the additional floodlighting to that particular area, which is an access between Shawcroft Centre and John Street. So it's currently there's currently no working floodlights up there. So this is the application to put some new working floodlights up there. And they say this is the full side of it because it is on a listed building as well. So there's a listed building side to it as well, which forms the second application in this process. The application being considered, the public benefit of providing security lighting is seen to outweigh any concerns with the design of it. There was some concerns with the hardware being fairly big where it is, particularly as it's a listed building. But we've said with the public benefit of it and wanting to get it sort of up and operational, that we'll consider some perhaps amended details for some slightly smaller hardware. But we would, we're not going to stop it from the process from happening moving forward. We've also put some conditions on about just best practice for putting any sort of installation on listed buildings, so making sure any sort of fixings are through the mortar rather than brickwork. So it's just the condition is to provide further details of the floodlights, just to see if we can get hardware that's slightly more appropriate, and if best practice for installing the floodlights, and then removing any redundant conduits and cabling from the building as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Councillor Hughes.
I think in retrospect I need to declare a non-pecuniary interest as the chair of the Ashbourne Reborn Programme Board.
Right.
Yeah, I assume I can still vote though, can I? Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Dobbs.
I'm a member of.
You too.
Board,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we're into questions then. From what Gina's outlined, do members have any particular questions? Councillor Buttle.
Gina, we're kind of marking our own homework here, aren't we? Who was it that decided we were going to put in floodlights which were a bit on the large side, which seems like a reasonably odd thing to do? I mean, as presumably we were involved in the original design.
I think it was a case that they wanted to put some floodlights up and they didn't. They've submitted an application to us in conservation, but probably it's in the future we will probably say engage in pre-application. So it was probably just a case that from future we'll also say if you come in, sort of put the idea to us before the application. But yeah, I think it was a case that they wanted to get it sort of done, so they didn't get to engage with us beforehand. So we've done the engagement as part of it, really.
Right, thanks.
Any further questions? If not, it's down to members now to move something. Councillor Bates.
I'd like to recommend approval.
Thank you.
This is urgently needed. It's a very dark area, and I want to see it done as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Bates, and Councillor Boyne, you'll second that. So it's been moved and seconded. Do members wish now to have any further discussions? If not, then we'll take the vote. All those in favour, please show. And that appears to be unanimous. Thank you. We turn then to pages 25 to 32 of the agenda for the second application. Proposed removal of existing exterior floodlight conduits on the eastern elevation and installation of 3 LED floodlights 18 to 20 St John Street, Ashbourne, that listing building consent be permitted, subject to the conditions set out in section 8 of the report. Again, I'll invite Gina, please, to introduce the application.
Thank you, Councillor. So this is the listed building consent side of the process, because 18 to 20 St John Street is a Grade 2 listed building. So this is just looking at the principle of the works to a listed building. So and we've said that obviously there's a public benefit of providing that security lighting down there. although we've asked for potentially looking at the hardware again. We know that we want the works to occur as soon as possible. So I've just put a condition on to try and perhaps look at alternative hardware. And then the other one is best practice about all fixings should be done through the mortar rather than brickwork. So it's just shoring up the listed building side of the proposal as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes
Yes, again, I've got a non-pecuniary interest.
and Councillor Dobbs. So if there are no questions from members, Councillor Bates.
Recommend approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Dobbs. So it's open now for debate. There seems to be no appetite tonight, doesn't it? Almost feel a fraud tonight. I mean, goodness. So it's been moved and seconded. Will members please indicate if they support the officer recommendation? Against? Abstentions? That appears to be unanimous then. Thank you. We turn then to the planning performance report, pages 33 to 40. Now, from that report, is there anything that any member would like to ask questions to the officers or make any comment about? Councillor Peacock.
I just wanted to know so we're looking at the report, aren't we?
Yes. Yeah.
At 2.12, it shows that we're substantially below average for percentage of decisions delegated to officers. I just wondered what officers think the reason for that is.
Thank you.
Yes,
Sean, would you?
Yeah, through you, Chair. I think it's part of a piece of work we've been doing at the moment, just looking at the scheme of delegation about, and for example, we haven't had that many recently, but when there's been 5 objections or more, and the officers are minded to refuse that application, that as a scheme of the current scheme of delegation is worded, that it has to go in front of members for a recommendation. That can sometimes trip it over in terms of how the officer delegation. So we are looking at changing that element. Barbara is very kindly, which is pulled together with Steve, and Kerry's had a little bit of input, but not a great deal, but myself as well. A great deal of input in terms of looking at the scheme of delegation, which will be presented to members, trying to expedite that, move that along. I mean, 91% is still very good, but the national average is 96. And there are a lot of authorities out there that hit in 100% scheme of delegation, just by how robust their schemes of delegation are.
Are you okay with that? Yeah. Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. Just to drill down a little bit further into that, to what extent is this due to councillor call-ins versus our own rules for coming to committee?
I mean, there have been a number of councillor call-ins as well, and wherever possible, practically possible, we're trying to get that within the time and so forth. But obviously, as soon as it hits a councillor call-in, that removes the delegations out there, so it's councillor call-in. I think the one or two of you, I've spoken to one or two of you today already, but you will be aware back in December and January, the government released its planning and infrastructure bill, which has now been laid down in the House of Commons today. And that brings forward a large raft of alterations to the planning system. One of those being there will be a national scheme of delegation. Now that in itself will probably, will change, has to change, because it's been brought in, will be brought in as a bill when it gets royal assent. And there is a time frame on the back of the bill that actually says when that kicks in, but effectively things like reserve matters, that'll be covered in the scheme of delegation, so the officer to make that recommendation. Dwellings for 10 to 100, proposals, residential proposals for 10 to 100 dwellings, that'll be covered in the scheme of delegation. So as long as it accords to the local plan, that'll be approved by the officers or refused. So effectively, that will, assuming it goes through the House of Commons and the House of Lords and gets royal assent, even if there is a large number of public involvement or concern with it, if it complies with policy, it'll get approved. That's gauged. There are other things in there about the NSIP proposals and so forth, and compulsory purchase orders and so forth, and authorities self-setting their own planning fees as well. But all that's tied up within that bill. But that in itself, going back to the original question, that will, unfortunately, that will expedite some of the scheme of delegation for officers. I say unfortunately because obviously some dwellings will fall down.
Councillor Buttle and then Councillor Slack.
I think most of my questions have been answered.
Thank you. Councillor Slack.
Will it speed the process up, Sean? Should speed the process up, should it? Well, all the backlog will be cleared up, will it?
That's what it's been engaged at, and again, as it's been laid down today, so I did have something else on today and the rest of the week that I've been involved with, but basically, just at the break, having a quick skim read of it, the bill itself, as it was gauged originally, and it's still in there.
Yeah.
The element that's touched upon there about the planning fees, for example, that those planning fees will be effectively ring-fenced for development management about true cost recovery of a planning application.
Yeah.
So whatever planning application, I mean, the planning fees now are going up beginning of April.
Yeah.
But does that quite cover the cost of delivering that planning fee? No, it doesn't. The planning application, no, it doesn't.
Just one other question. Appeals, can people appeal against it, or is it?
What, appeal against the officer decision for
yeah, officer's decision. Yeah.
No.
No, it's no appeal. No.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, sorry. The applicant, if it's a refusal, for example, on the delegated post, they still have the right of appeal on that basis. It doesn't negate that.
Yeah.
But obviously, if the officers...
If it's a recommendation.
For approval, yes.
So it's, straightforward.
Sorry, I misunderstood the question there, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Hughes.
It's not a great day for democracy, is it really? You know, we spend hours and hours in this room. You know, we never normally have an issue with an application when it comes to housing or whatever, but there are certain issues we have concerns about and whatever. And you know, Severn Trent and one or two others, they are sometimes found wanting, whatever. But you rely on the submissions from, you know, statutory consultees and whatever, and we always say that you guys aren't experts, so you believe what you're told. You have to. I'm just wondering how the public and the residents of Derbyshire Dales are going to react to this. I know we have no choice. I mean, you know, when you've got a majority like Labour have in Westminster, they can do anything they like. But I think it's a sad day, personally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Buttle.
I did have more questions earlier, but you were getting ahead of me. Do we know whether or not this planning committee will have any input into the compulsory purchase of existing developments that have not been taken ahead, which is something that's been suggested by the Labour government against less than hope value? Now, do we know that? Is this something that this committee would be involved in, or is it something that would be, I don't know, is it a full council's job? Who gets to do that stuff? Do we know?
I can speak a little bit to this point in terms of my involvement with CPOs in the past, but that has been a full council decision, and the legislation as it is currently gauged, obviously there is suggestions within the bill that's got how it's going to be evolved, I think made expedited a little bit. Forgive me, I haven't read the full documentation on that within the bill, but it is a full council. It will be a full council decision, but there has to be certain criteria why the authority is effectively buying that land or buying parcels of land to develop or bring forward a regeneration scheme or housing scheme or whatever the case may be. But the test or the bar itself is set quite high and it is justifiable. You have to justify it. And obviously, if, for example, an authority is buying a piece of land or bringing forward a piece of land to then take to market for another developer to come forward and then deliver it, then obviously there's an outlay of cash in there. Obviously, so there's lots of things to consider, Councillor. Certainly, it wouldn't be solely a decision of the planning committee. It would be full council that would make that decision.
Thank you.
Councillor Hughes, then Councillor Slack.
Thank you. Yeah, just really pursuing Councillor Murphy's point about lack of democracy. I understand really that planning committees don't really have very much power, and I think the residents believe that they've got more power than they actually do have. The power is really with the statutory consultees, not the planning authority itself. In our case, where a lot of the decisions that are made are the consequence of technical features, not the things that would naturally apply to the planning authority itself. So flooding, that sort of thing. What it means is that the local plan is going to be much more important, and also the assignment of outline planning permission. So under the Conservatives' approach, which had a lot of merit, if something had been put into the local plan as a development site, then it would have been really deemed to have outline planning permission, and so it would move really quite quickly to reserve matters. And that seemed to have merit, provided that the local plan was strong. And I think the same is true of this position as well, given that the planning committee will have less power. The officers need to have the local plan needs to have all the characteristics that the local community would wish to have, in order that the planning officers can discharge recommendations that would be met with approval by the local area. So I feel that we need to make sure our local plan is as strong as possible and we get it implemented as quickly as possible. I think that's all I've got to say, but that's my view.
No, thank you for bringing that to our attention. You're absolutely right, David. Councillor Slack.
Can we still have a dialogue with you before you make your decision? Can we bring views of residents to you before you make your decision? It's like the other way around now, isn't it?
And again, it is subject to obviously going through the House of Commons and then the Lords as well and get royal assent, but it would be dependent on exactly how that national scheme of delegation is worded. And again, once that's worded, that will be uniform across the whole of England. So I don't want to say yes or no at this stage. I don't know exactly how that's going to be worded or how that's going to be gauged. I mean, it may simply be, I'd hope it's more than this, but it may simply be if it calls a policy or there's policy in the local plan that supports it, then it should be approved. If it's as simple as that unfortunately the answer will be no to what you've suggested. But again, until I've seen that, I can't really comment.
I know some members feel that it's infringing on democracy, but we've got so behind, haven't we, with a lot of applications. So we do need to move to build the houses, don't we, in my opinion. Thank you.
But are the houses going to be for local need, Peter? This is the continuing issue all the time. I heard it on Radio 4 today, a particular village, not in our area, but the reality is this valuable land is being taken, but it's not addressing the needs of that community. Just Councillor Buttle.
Sorry.
This one's a question which you might be able to answer. Do we have any local plans in the country which involve or require local consultation before anything's put forward? Can we actually write the consultation into our local plan?
That would, so I can give you an example. So if you were looking at or considering considering an application coming forward for a large residential development or a large sustainable urban extension, a large tag on to a settlement, if an authority has in the SCI, the Statement of Community Involvement, if it says development over a certain percentage that the developer should hold various events, various presentations, then that's the way of doing it. It wouldn't be in policy. You couldn't write it into policy, but you could enshrine it within the SCI that an authority has, Statement of Community Involvement.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I'm perplexed at 2.14 on page 37. Unlike many around this committee that passed their 11 plus, I didn't. So can someone explain to me 23 to 24, 27 appeals were determined, of which 5 were allowed. And then below that, from the 1st of April to the 31st of December, 27 appeals were determined, of which 7 were allowed. I couldn't really make heads or tails of that.
Yes, I can explain that one too. It depends when the actual, I mean, the application itself or the appeal. When the application was refused, and if that's successful and it's allowed on appeal, then basically that once the authority, once ourselves receive that notification from the inspectorate that's been allowed, that then counts within that figure. So effectively you've got to go back into some of these figures. So it doesn't quite add up. I mean, the issue here is that if over a rolling programme of 2 years, if an authority has got 10% of its major applications at appeal have been allowed, regardless of what the recommendation is, whether it's official recommendation at committee or whether or not it's members' recommendation at committee, but if they've been allowed, if it's 10% or more, that's when the authority is at risk again being designated, i.e. those applications will go to a wing of the planning inspector to be determined. Right. So it depends. I mean, the government is currently considering as part of the planning and infrastructure bill, I believe. I need to check this is still in there, but it may be a certain other element. But that 2-year rolling programme may be looking at 12 months. And if it is, a lot of authorities, ourselves included, are going to be in trouble. However, that hasn't been confirmed yet. It may not be. It may not be. But as it stands at this moment, I mean, yes, you are correct. From first glance, the figures don't appear to add up. Yeah. But it depends when that decision was reached and when it goes back on it. So, for example, what's happening today, and when that decision's reached, if that decision is reached before the end of this month by the inspector, or even into April, that because the decision was reached as of March, that would go within that 2-year rolling programme, even though it's in a new financial year. So it's how, when that decision is reached by the inspector. It's not clear. And when the government run those figures off, they are subject to challenge. The authority can go back and just ask for clarity on how those numbers are worked out. Now, more often than not, that doesn't happen if you're below the 10%. However, if you're 10.3% or 10.7%, that 0.7, it may well have been when that figure actually hits. So that's when authority would then be challenging that point, or should challenge that point.
Thank you. Would any member like to just move that we note the report, please? Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please show.
Chair, could I speak on the proposal?
Yes, absolutely.
I think when you look at the report in detail, it says 2 things to me. Firstly, our officers have been performing well over the past 2 years, notwithstanding the difficult circumstances that the officer team has faced over that period with change in staff. So I think officers need to be congratulated for the good performance which this report exemplifies. I also think the report shows that the committee has been performing well in the way a committee should perform. It shows that collectively we've challenged constructively where appropriate, and in the majority of cases, that's been supported by the planning inspector. I don't think we should be necessarily put off by the fact that there's been a number of appeals allowed where a committee has taken a different view from officers. I think as others have said, that reflects the fact that I think across the board, irrespective of political allegiances, there's now a concern that our local plan is somewhat out of date, and the committee's been prepared to recognise that and say circumstances have changed, and therefore we don't want to be held by thinking which might have been appropriate in 2017 in respect of application, but isn't appropriate in 2024-25. So I think also the report reflects well on the committee. So I think we should modestly, congratulate ourselves, if you like. I'd also add that I had the honour of going to it was a training course, but it was a conference as well for planning chairs from across the country. And we had an opportunity, and it was a mixture from large urban authorities, and we were the smallest authority there, although we're not the smallest by any means in the country. And we had an opportunity to share experiences across the board, including schemes of delegation and issues around proportions of applications refused, and the way we operate as a council, the collaborative way we operate, as a committee, the way the interaction between members and officers, the fact that we have questions, etc. We're not dictatorial in the way we operate as a committee, and I think it was certainly well received by peers from across the country. So I think again, this isn't due to the one party. This is due to the way the committee operates, as I said, collaboratively and collectively from around the table.
Councillor Bryan, I obviously fully support those comments. To say thank you doesn't seem the right word to use, but I think your observations are absolutely correct, and it's, I think, right occasionally that members do, in fact, as you've done tonight, express our thanks to officers for their professional input and service that they give to the planning committee. Does anyone else wish on? Because I mean, the observations, the points Councillor Bryan has made, I think, are very relevant. And I think, in fairness, in a non-partisan way, we have worked hard to try with this new council to ensure that, this committee in particular is very user-friendly to the general public. So it has been moved and seconded. All those in favour that we receive this report, please. And that again is unanimous. Thank you. And then we turn then to the appeals progress report on pages 41 to 62. Is there anything listed here that members wish to raise? There's a general question I want to raise in a moment, but pertaining all these impending applications and appeals, planning appeals. So what I would like to just simply ask the officers, because I'm sure all members have on occasions similar scenarios to one in Darley-Dale, where you've got a planning appeal progressing. We seemed unable to, I don't know, be more, I don't know what the word is, in this particular case, the guy is just carrying on, much to the annoyance, and obviously people ring me or speak to me as one of the 3 ward members, and they've spoken certainly to the other 2, and I went past it the other day, and it just seems to be like 2 fingers up to the planning committee. And
to come back on that point, I mean, basically, we're talking about enforcement here, and there are stop notices, there are temporary stop notices, but the bar for either of those two actions is incredibly high. I mean, a typical example of a stop notice would be if life and limb was at risk. So, for example, if someone was reversing onto an A road with an HGV vehicle and there was high risk of fatality, that's when a stop notice would be used. Same with a temporary stop notice, that you use that when the bar is quite high then when there's real risk, because if an authority, or where an authority, to incorrectly serve a stop notice or a temporary stop notice, and if the individual or company in question was to then appeal that, and it was found that the authority hadn't served it correctly and the assessment they'd done wasn't high enough, or that bar wasn't reached or gone through, then there is recompense that the authority must pay to the person, which is, again, it's that insult on the wound that if you think it should be done, and we do, and that does happen, then they can appeal, and it could be, it's not small amounts you're looking at here. So there are other mechanisms we can use, I mean, other than this temporary or full stop notice, but we do try and chase them down. We have got better. I think Gavin delivered some very good training to members and to parish and town councils alike. The system there was a few little glitches recently, but the reporting the system for enforcement or alleged enforcement breaches has become a little more streamlined now, so it makes it easier to open and close cases and or address them. So we are getting better, but obviously, unfortunately, the wheel is turning, Councillor, but it doesn't turn as quickly as the public would like. But obviously, we do have to there are checks and measures that we've got to try and carry through ourselves. Otherwise, you have to start the process again, and it could be another year, 2 years, 3 years before you can take any action.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Hughes and then Councillor Buttle.
Chair, I'd just like to say how I appreciate that the enforcement system has very radically tightened up, and in recent months, I think Gavin Treen is doing an extremely good job, and I'd like to, say, well done, really, because it's a lot better than it was in previous times. Thank you.
Neil.
David, we've got the appeal going on in here during the week, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Started today.
Would there be, if I was to find time to come and visit and to enjoy the prospect, as it were, is there a particular point of it which would actually be particularly relevant and useful? Where would I learn the most?
That's a good question, Neil.
Through you, Chair. I mean, obviously, I'm looking at Councillor Dobbs at the moment. I mean, obviously, Councillor Dobbs had a recent enjoyment of the Wyston Road, and I think each day is different, and I think each inspector is different, and I think what is invaluable is just seeing some of the questions or lines of questions that the inspector may come back with, or how the appellant's barrister phrases questions or cross-examines someone. For example, we started the cross-examination today of the Rule 6 Party's advocate, Roger Yarwood. That continues again tomorrow morning. It didn't quite finish yet, got about halfway through from about 2 o'clock up to about 5:15 today, so there's about probably another 2 hours tomorrow. That might be an opportunity from 9:30 tomorrow to take it on board. But I mean, a lot of it is live streamed as well, Councillor, if you didn't want to come down. So you can watch it in the comfort of your own home. Or alternatively, you can come down and just take a chair. But certainly towards the end of the week, certainly Thursday, that's if the timetable sticks to as it is and the timetable is available online, that's when we're discussing the potential of conditions where the inspector to approve the application and the obligations for the 106. So that might add a little bit of extra interest that perhaps she wasn't wholly aware of. But certainly the whole thing is interesting.
Yes, I'm sure it is. Actually, no, I did turn up for the last one as well, just the odd day. But I'll try Thursday. Thank you.
Any further comments at all? If not, I'll move that the report be noted. Does that find a seconder, please? Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please show. Against, and that is carried. and I'm able to say that the meeting is now concluded. Thank you, members.